The sound of air conditioning in a corporate boardroom has always reminded me of a ghost whispering. This time it seemed particularly ominous. I was sitting on a hard office chair, sandwiched between Doris from the quality control department and Malcolm, who was in charge of calibrating the equipment. We, 20 employees from various departments of the Oklahoma textiles factory, had been called together at 10 in the morning, although normally I would have been at my desk by this time, checking fabric samples for compliance with standards. Thank you for coming, Robert Flanagan, the Vice President of Human Resources, who we rarely saw at the factory, began. As you may have heard, Global Textile completed the acquisition of our company last week. Doris tensed. We all knew about the takeover, but we had been assured that it would not affect our jobs. I could feel my palms starting to sweat. Unfortunately, after careful analysis, Global has decided to close the Tulsa factory and move production to their existing facilities in Mexico. He paused as if waiting for a reaction, but the room was shocked into silence. Today will be your last day of work. Malcolm next to me exhaled sharply. 29 years, he whispered. 29 damn years. I couldn't speak. 27 years of my life had been spent in this factory. I came here when Ezra was only 8. Now he's 35, married, living in a prestigious neighborhood, and I just lost the only stability I had. The rest of the meeting was a blur. Flanagan talked about compensation, pitiful, considering my years of service, about helping me find a new job, which is unlikely to be found at my age, and about how Global Textiles values the contributions of every employee, so much so that they threw us out on the street with minimal warning. After the meeting, I returned to my workplace to collect my personal belongings. Over the 27 years, I had accumulated a few. Ezra's graduation photo, a cactus that had somehow survived decades under fluorescent lights, a mug with the inscription Best Mom, a gift from my colleagues, not from my son. How are you, Martha? Doris peeked into my bunk, her eyes red with tears. I'm fine, I answered automatically, although everything inside was screaming. Terrible. 47 years old, and who needs me now? A husband on disability? A mortgage? She shook her head. At least you have a son who can help. I held back a bitter smile. Ezra could certainly help. He had a good job as an insurance appraiser, a house in a prestigious neighborhood, a wife who sold real estate for commissions that exceeded my annual salary. But lately, our relationship had been strained. He rarely called, visited even less often, and when I mentioned financial difficulties, he quickly changed the subject. We'll see, was all I could say. I left the factory at 13 o'clock, carrying a cardboard box with things that symbolized almost 3 decades of my life. The sun was bright, merciless. It's so unfair that on the day your life is falling apart, the sky can be so blue. Sitting in my old Ford, I allowed myself one moment of weakness. The tears that I had been holding back all morning finally burst out. I cried as I clutched the steering wheel, thinking about my uncertain future, my meager savings, and the rent I had to pay. When my tears dried, I started the car and drove home to my modest apartment on the outskirts of Tulsa. The apartment I had rented for the past 15 years was small, but clean and cozy. 1 bedroom, a living room that opened into the kitchen, and a tiny balcony overlooking the parking lot. Not much for 53 years of life, but I never complained. I put the box on the kitchen table and mechanically checked the mailbox. Among the advertising brochures and bills, there was an envelope that stood out for its paper quality and official appearance. The sender was Hargrave, Stubbs and Partners, a law firm. At first I thought it was a mistake. Then I thought it might be a class action lawsuit against the factory because of the closure. But the letter was addressed to me personally. I opened the envelope and started reading. With each line, my eyes widened more and more. Dear Mrs. Ellington, the letter began, it is with deep regret that we inform you of the death of your uncle Alfred Ellington, which occurred on August 15th of this year in Budapest, Hungary. According to his will, you are the sole heir to his estate, which includes real estate in Europe, investment assets, and personal savings totaling approximately $3 million US. I read the letter 3 times before the meaning began to sink in. Uncle Alfred? I barely remembered him. My father's brother, who had left for Europe before I was born. He sometimes sent me Christmas cards, but after my parents died 20 years ago, the connection was broken. And now he left me $3 million? It had to be some kind of mistake or fraud. But the letter contained details that only a real relative could know: my parents' names, my date of birth, my childhood address. And the contact information looked completely legitimate: a phone number, an email, an office address in New York. I sat down on the couch, feeling the room spin around me. In one day, I had lost the job that had been the foundation of my life for almost 3 decades and potentially gained an amount of money I could not even imagine. $3 million. I could have bought a house, several houses. I could travel, never have to worry about bills or work again. But was it a real letter? I had to check. Picking up the phone, I dialed the number on the letter. Hargraves, Stubbs and Partners, how may I help you? A professional female voice answered. My name is Martha Ellington, I said, trying to control the tremor in my voice. I received a letter regarding an inheritance from Alfred Ellington. Oh yes, Mrs. Ellington. We've been trying to reach you. Just a moment, I'll put you through to Mr. Stubbs. A few seconds later, a deep male voice greeted me and confirmed everything in the letter. Uncle Alfred had indeed died. He had indeed left me all his property. And yes, the amount was indeed about $3 million. We'll need to meet in person to do the paperwork, Mr. Stubbs explained, but most of the process can be done remotely. We can send you the documents by courier. After the conversation ended, I sat staring into space for a long time. Part of me wanted to scream with joy. The other part wanted to laugh at the irony of the situation. On the very day I lost my job and financial stability, the universe decided to throw me a yacht-sized life preserver. My first thought was about Ezra. I had to tell him, but then I hesitated. Our relationship had been difficult in recent years. He had become different since marrying Paisley, more distant, more critical of me. I was ashamed to admit it, but sometimes it seemed like he was ashamed of me, his mother with her simple job and modest life. And now that I've lost my job, what will he think? What will he say? I could already see the disappointment in his eyes during our rare meetings when he asked about my career or savings. Mom, you realize you can't work forever, right? Are you saving anything for retirement? He would ask, as if I were an irresponsible child, not a woman who had raised him on her own while working in a factory. What could I tell him? That after paying for rent, utilities, food, health insurance, and helping him with college, I had almost nothing left? That I had saved as much as I could, but it would barely be enough for a few years of modest living? And now this news about the inheritance? I decided not to tell him about the money yet. First, I had to tell him about losing my job, see how he reacted, and get his support as a mother, not as a newly minted millionaire. I felt strange hiding this news from my son, but something inside me told me it was the right decision. First, I wanted to see his true reaction to my bad news, without the influence of potential wealth. Putting the letter in the drawer, I took a deep breath. Tomorrow. Tomorrow I would go to Ezra and tell him everything, at least part of it. That night I barely slept, my thoughts flitting between the fear of unemployment and the dizziness of unexpected wealth. I remembered my life, the decisions that led me here. I had always lived for Ezra. After his father left when he was only 3 years old, leaving us with struggles and broken dreams, I vowed that my son would have everything he needed. I worked overtime, turned down promotions that would have required more travel, saved on myself so that he could have nice clothes, clubs, and later college. I was proud that he was the first in our family to get a college degree. I cried with happiness at his graduation, even though I was sitting alone, while other graduates were surrounded by large families. You did everything right, Marta, I said to myself, looking up at the ceiling in the darkness. He has a good job, a nice house, a wife. You achieved what you wanted. But then why was there this emptiness in my heart? Why did his success seem so alienated from me? In the morning, I woke up with a headache and a feeling of unreality. The whole day yesterday seemed like a dream, both the loss of my job and the inheritance letter. But the envelope was still in the drawer, and my factory pass no longer worked. Everything was real. I took a shower, put on my best sweater and pants, and even put on some makeup, something I rarely did. Perhaps if I looked put together and confident, Ezra would take the news of my dismissal less negatively. As I got into the car, I tried to imagine our conversation. Maybe it would even bring us closer together. Perhaps he would offer to help, invite me to move in with them for a while until I got back on my feet. It would give us a chance to reconnect, which we seem to have lost. With these thoughts in mind, I took to the road, heading for the prestigious suburb where my son lived. I didn't know that this trip would change everything between us, but not in the way I had hoped. The neighborhood where Ezra lived from Paisley was called Oak Grove, although I didn't notice any oak trees. Instead, there were neatly mowed lawns, identical young maple trees lining the streets, and carefully designed estates that looked like pages out of an interior design magazine. I felt like an uninvited guest in this world as my old Ford moved slowly down the street, looking for the address. Ezra's house was a two-story brick building with columns at the entrance and three garages on the side. I parked in the driveway, feeling like my car looked out of place on the perfectly paved street. Throughout the drive, I rehearsed what I was going to say. I tried to find the words that would sound dignified, without self-pity, but also without fake cheerfulness. I lost my job, but I see it as a new opportunity. No, too optimistic. The factory closed. I need advice. Better, but still not the same. I got out of the car, smoothed out my dress, the best I had, although it was bought on sale 3 years ago, and walked to the door. I took a deep breath and pressed the doorbell, which played a tune I hadn't heard before. Something classical, maybe Mozart. The door opened, and Paisley appeared on the threshold, slim as a model, with perfect honey-colored hair, and a face that always looked like she had just left a beauty salon. She was wearing a simple white blouse and navy blue pants that I was sure cost more than my weekly salary. "Martha, it's good to see you," she said with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Come on in. Ezra's still in the shower." "Thank you, Paisley." I walked in, trying not to look too overwhelmed by the luxurious interior. High ceilings, marble floors in the lobby, glass doors leading to a terrace overlooking a manicured garden. "It's a beautiful house you have." "Oh yeah, we were lucky to find it before it went on the market. The perk of being in real estate." Paisley led me into the spacious kitchen, where glasses and a bottle of wine stood on a granite island. "Red, please," I replied, though I wasn't really thirsty. I needed a clear head for the conversation that lay ahead. As Paisley poured the wine, I looked around the kitchen. Everything was new and shiny, from the stainless steel appliances to the ceramic tiles on the floor. A small TV on the wall showed a news channel with no sound. "How's your work?" Paisley asked, handing me a glass. Her tone was politely disinterested, as if she were performing a social ritual, not expecting to hear anything of value. What was I supposed to say? "Actually, that's what I wanted to talk about," I began. But at that moment, Ezra appeared. My son. He was tall like his father, but with my eyes dark brown with golden specks. Lately, he had gained weight around the waist, and his brown hair was beginning to thin at the crown. But in my eyes, he was still the most beautiful man in the world. I stood up to hug him. "Hi, Mom." He hugged me quickly, formally, and then pulled back. "I got held up at work." "That's okay. I had a nice talk with Paisley," I lied. "How's your work? Are you getting a lot of clients?" "Quite a few," he replied briefly. "Mostly car accidents, nothing special." "Ezra, your mom was asking about work," Paisley interjected with a small smile. "I told her we had something we needed to talk about over dinner." I looked at them curiously. "Something good, I hope." Ezra and Paisley exchanged glances. "Maybe," Ezra said with a half smile. "But first, let's eat dinner. I'm starving." We sat down at the dining room table in the next room, a huge oak piece that looked like it was meant for a family of 10, not 3. Paisley served lasagna, salad, and bread, all bought at a gourmet store, as she immediately explained. "I just didn't have time to cook today," she said as she set out the food. "My screening schedule is packed so far." "It looks great," I assured her, though I had little interest in the food. My stomach was tied in knots with tension. We ate in silence for the first few minutes. I was trying to think of a way to start a conversation about my release when Ezra suddenly put down his fork and looked at Paisley with a smile. "Mom, We want to share some news, he said. Paisley and I, we're trying to have a baby. I felt a warm wave of joy flood through my body, temporarily displacing my anxiety. That's wonderful. I'm so happy for you both. We've been planning this for months now, Ezra continued, taking Paisley's hand. And now, with the new house, the timing is perfect. Plus, I've already made some progress in my career, Paisley added. I can cut back on my hours once the baby arrives. That's great. I, I've always wanted to be a grandmother. I felt the tears welling up, but I held them back. This was their moment, and I didn't want to spoil it with my emotionality. So we've made some financial adjustments, Ezra continued, his tone more businesslike. Budgeting for a nursery, paying for additional health insurance, saving for education. I nodded, not quite sure what he was getting at. That's wise. Children are expensive, it's true. And that means we have to be more careful with our spending, Ezra said, looking at Paisley, who nodded slightly, including helping others. My heart sank. Was he talking about me? But he'd barely helped me financially in years. The last time he lent me money was when my car broke down 2 years ago, and I paid back every cent within 3 months. I understand, I said slowly, and I'm very glad you're planning your future so responsibly. The moment had come. I took a deep breath. Actually, I have some news too, although it's not as good. My voice was quieter than I expected. I was fired yesterday. The factory is being closed due to a takeover. There was silence. Paisley froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. Ezra slowly put his down, his face impenetrable. When did this happen? He finally asked. Yesterday morning. They called everyone together and announced it. It was unexpected. What's the compensation? Was the first thing my son asked. Not, how do you feel? Or, what are you going to do? But, how much money will you get? 2 weeks for every year you work, I answered. But after taxes and deductions, it's not as much as it sounds. Ezra sighed and rubbed his face. Geez, Mom, did you put anything away for this? I've been telling you for years that you need to have an emergency fund. His tone struck me as if he were talking to me like a foolish child. I do have some savings, I replied defensively. But with the current prices of rent, utilities, insurance, there's always an excuse, isn't there? Interrupted Ezra. There's always a reason why you can't plan ahead. Ezra, Paisley warned, glaring at him. No, Pace. This has been going on for years. He turned to me. Mom, you've been at this job for 27 years. 27 years, and what do you have to show for it? You don't even own your own home. I felt my face burning. I raised my son, I said, trying to stay calm. I paid for your college. Part of it, he corrected. And I'm grateful for that, I really am. But you've always lived like there's no tomorrow. That's not fair. I felt the tears coming again, but this time from anger and resentment. I've always lived frugally. I saved as much as I could. Obviously not enough, Paisley interjected. You know, my mom started investing in her retirement fund when she was 30. Now she and my dad live in Florida, playing golf every day. I didn't bother to remind her that her parents were a doctor and a lawyer, with very different opportunities than her single mother who worked in a factory. I didn't come here to ask for money, I said as calmly as I could. I just wanted to share the news. I thought you would want to know. And what are you going to do now? Asked Ezra, ignoring my attempt at dignity. At your age, it's not going to be easy to find a new job. At my age, I repeated. I'm only 53, not 80. I haven't thought about specific plans yet. It just happened yesterday. Typical, Ezra muttered. No plan. I felt something inside me crack. After years of trying to be the perfect mother, after all the sacrifices I'd made, my son was talking to me like I was a hopeless disappointment. I don't understand why you're talking to me like that, I said, my voice trembling. I came for support, not judgment. And I don't understand why you think we can be held responsible for your decisions, Ezra replied, his voice hardening. We just told you we're trying to have a baby. We have our own financial obligations. I didn't ask you for money, I repeated, feeling my cheeks burning. I just wanted you to know what was going on in my life. Paisley sighed and put down her napkin. Martha, I think what Ezra is trying to say is that we can't, well, support you financially at this point. I never asked for support, I said, looking at them both in disbelief. I paid back every cent you loaned me to fix my car. I didn't take any money from you for rent, food, anything. But you expect us to be your insurance policy, don't you? Said Ezra, his voice rising. And now you've come here to set the stage. No! I was shocked by his interpretation. I came because I thought my son would want to know that his mother lost the job she had for almost 3 decades. And what did you expect me to do with that information? Ezra stood up, his hands clenched into fists. Give you money? What, Mom? I felt my heart break, not only from his words, but also from how easily, how naturally the hostility came to the surface. How long had he felt this way about me? How long had he been carrying this resentment, this contempt? I expected a little humanity, I answered quietly. A little compassion. How can you be so cold? I'm just being realistic, Ezra said. You've always had your head in the clouds, refusing to recognize your limitations. Your job was a dead end, but you held on to it instead of looking for something better. I held on to it because it gave me stability, health insurance, and I could be home when you got home from school. Now I stood up too, anger eclipsing my sadness. I could have gone to school, changed careers, but then who would take care of you? Who would go to your soccer games? Who would cook you dinner every night? Oh, so now it's my fault? Ezra's eyes narrowed. You sacrificed yourself for me, and so I have to feel guilty for the rest of my life? No! I couldn't believe we had come to this point. I don't want you to feel guilty. I just want you to understand. Understand what? That you didn't prepare for the future, and now it's somehow my problem? Paisley coughed. Maybe we should all just calm down a little, she said. But her eyes were cold and judgmental, as if I were a customer trying to buy a house she couldn't afford. No, let's get this straight right now. Ezra turned to me. Mom, I love you, but I can't solve your problems. Paisley and I are planning a family. We have a new house, new commitments. We can't be your lifeboat. Why do you keep talking about money? I could feel the tears finally breaking through my self-control. I didn't ask you for a penny. But you'll come for it, he said with such confidence that it hurt me. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. Ezra, I can't pay the rent this month. Ezra, I need a new winter coat. Ezra, I have a tooth problem. I looked at him in horror. When was the last time I asked you for money? When? Tell me a specific date. He was silent for a moment, reluctant to admit that it had been a long time since I had asked for financial help. It's not about the last time, he finally said. It's about the fact that you don't have a plan. You've always lived from paycheck to paycheck. Because my paycheck was small, I exclaimed. And a large part of it went to your education, for your needs. And it's my fault? Ezra shook his head. You know, Mom, other parents manage somehow. Other parents plan, save, invest. Other parents have partners who help out, I replied. Other parents don't raise their kids alone on minimum wage. More excuses, he sighed. There are always excuses. I looked at him, my son, my pride, my joy, and suddenly realized that I didn't know who he was. This cold, judgmental man was not the child I had raised. Or maybe he was, and I just didn't notice what he had become. You know, I said, wiping away the tears that were already streaming down my cheeks, I thought you'd be happy for me. Happy that you lost your job? He laughed without humor. No, I'm glad that I can start something new, that I'll be free from a job that sucked the life out of me. And what will you live on during this new beginning? He asked sarcastically. I'll manage, I said with a dignity I barely felt. I've always managed. Yeah, just barely. He shook his head. You know, Mom, I have friends whose parents are successful. They have careers, achievements. They can talk about something other than what a hard day at the factory is. I stepped back as if he had hit me. Are you ashamed of me? His silence was the answer. Are you ashamed that your mother worked with her hands instead of sitting in an office? My voice trembled with disbelief. Ashamed that I don't have a college degree like your friends' parents? I'm ashamed that you never tried for more, he finally said. That you just gave up. Gave up? Now I was not just insulted, I was furious. You call that giving up? Working the same job for 27 years to provide you with everything you needed? Is it giving up to take care of your child day and night without a break, without help? Does giving up mean putting aside your dreams, your ambitions, so that your child can fulfill his? Paisley suddenly stood up. I think we all need to take a breath, she said, her voice strained. It's been a long day and… No, let her speak, Ezra interrupted, his face hardening. Let her tell me how much she sacrificed for me and how I should be forever grateful. I'm not asking for your gratitude, I said, trying to control my voice. I'm asking for your kindness, your understanding. Is that so much to ask? Understand what? That you're in trouble again and don't have a plan? That you expect the world or me to solve your problems? I've never asked you to solve my problems, I shouted now, unable to control my emotions. I've always managed on my own. And look how well that's working out for you, Ezra said, his voice quiet but hard. 53 years old, no job, no savings, no plan. I stood there looking at my son, feeling something between us finally break. Maybe it had been tearing for years, and I just didn't notice or didn't want to notice. I think I'd better go, I finally said, gathering my bag. Yeah, maybe it's best, Ezra agreed, making no attempt to stop me. You didn't even ask me how I was feeling, I said, turning to the door. You went straight to how it would affect you, your money. Because we're realists, Paisley said, standing next to Ezra, a united front against me, a baby to take care of. I took care of the baby too, I said. I took care of you, Ezra. I gave you everything I had. And that's the problem, isn't it? He shook his head. You've defined yourself through me for so long that you don't know who you are without being a sacrificial mother. It's not fair. I felt new tears forming. It's not fair. No, it's fair, Ezra replied. And maybe that's what you need to hear. Maybe losing your job is your chance to finally get back on your feet, to stop clinging to the past, to stop using me as an excuse. Using you? I couldn't believe my ears. When have I ever used you? I couldn't continue my studies because of you. I couldn't get a better job because of you. I couldn't move because of you, Ezra listed. I was always the reason you couldn't have a better life. I never said that, I said, though maybe I thought it sometimes. I never blamed you. Not overtly, he shrugged, but it was always there, under the surface. And you know what? I'm tired of feeling guilty. I'm tired of being your excuse. Maybe it's time for you to finally learn to live on your own. These words hit me like a physical blow. Finally learn to live on my own? I repeated. I've been living on my own since your father left and left us with nothing. I paid the bills, I earned money, I solved problems. You know what I mean, Ezra said, his eyes cold. It's time to stop clinging to the past. It's time to stop expecting someone else to solve your problems. The only person I ever expected to help me was you, I said quietly. Not money, not problem solving, just kindness, support. And I'm supposed to give you that because… What? Because you're my mother? Because you decided to have me? Paisley put her hand on his shoulder, but her expression showed that she was completely on his side. Because we're family, I answered. Because that's how people are supposed to treat each other. Family doesn't mean unconditional support for failures and bad decisions, Ezra said. Sometimes the kindest thing to do is to tell the truth. And the truth is, Mom, you need to fix your life. You need to find a new job. Start saving. Plan for your future instead of being nostalgic about the past. I can't believe I'm hearing this from you, I said, already at the door. I don't recognize my son in this man in front of me. Maybe you never really knew me, he replied. Maybe you only saw what you wanted to see. That thought hovered between us, terrifying in its possible truth. I'm going, I said at last. Thank you for… dinner. Martha, Paisley said suddenly, her voice neutral. I really hope you find a job soon. It's hard at your age. This feigned concern was the last straw. Thank you for your sympathy, Paisley, I said, not trying to hide my sarcasm. And congratulations on your unborn child. I hope she never disappoints you the way I disappointed Ezra. I left the house without waiting for an answer. I got into the car, my hands shaking so badly that I could barely put the key in the ignition. When I finally started the car and got on the road, my tears were pouring so hard that I could barely see in front of me. All these years I thought I knew my son. I thought I had raised a kind, caring man. But the man in that house, he was someone else. Someone who was ashamed of me. Someone who saw me as a burden, not a mother. My thoughts returned to the letter hidden in a drawer at home. $3 million. I could go back right now and show it to Ezra, see how his face would change, how he would start making excuses, explaining that he didn't mean it. But I knew I wouldn't. Not after what I saw today. Not after he showed me his true face. The drive home was the longest of my life. I drove almost at random, missing turns several times, having to turn around and go back. My tears dried, leaving me feeling devastated and light at the same time, as if something heavy that I had been carrying for years had finally disappeared. My illusions about my son, about our connection, all crumbled in one evening. When I finally parked in front of my apartment building, it was well after 9 p.m. My neighbors, an elderly couple named Henderson, were sitting on their porch enjoying the cool evening air. "Hi, Martha," Edna called out, waving. "Are you okay? You look tired." "Tough day," I replied with a forced smile. "I'll see you tomorrow." I didn't have the energy to talk. Not now, when my insides were still bleeding from Ezra's words, from his cold eyes, from the realization that my son was ashamed of me. Ashamed of who I am, how I lived, the choices I made for him. I went upstairs to my apartment, kicked off my shoes, and fell on the couch without turning on the light. It seemed easier to breathe in the dark, easier to think. Why hadn't I ever noticed? How long had Ezra felt this disdain for me? And was there anything I could have done differently? My gaze fell on the drawer where the letter of inheritance was. I got up and took it out, rereading the lines that seemed fantastic. With a total value of approximately 3 million US dollars. Yesterday, these words seemed unrealistic. Now, after tonight's dinner, they sounded almost like an answer from fate, like a strange, unexpected chance for something new. 3 million reasons to start over. 3 million reasons not to feel like a victim, a failure, a burden anymore. The next morning, I woke up early, despite the fact that I had slept intermittently. I made coffee and, without hesitation, called the number of a law firm in New York. "Hargrave, Stubbs and Partners, how may I help you?" the same professional female voice answered. "This is Martha Ellington. I'd like to speak with Mr. Stubbs about my uncle's estate." "Of course, Ms. Ellington. Mr. Stubbs has been expecting your call." A few minutes later, Mr. Stubbs's deep voice came through the speaker on my phone. "Ms. Ellington, it's good to speak with you again. Have you thought about our conversation yesterday?" "Yes. I want to move forward with the succession process. What do you need to do that?" For the next hour, Mr. Stubbs explained the procedure to me in detail. The documents to be signed, the bank details to be provided, the tax forms to be filled out. He said that most of Uncle Alfred's estate had already been liquidated, and the funds were waiting to be transferred. As soon as I sign the necessary documents, the money can be in my account within a week. "I will send the documents by courier today," Mr. Stubbs promised. "They should arrive tomorrow or the day after. Once you sign and return them, we will begin the process of transferring the funds." After the conversation ended, I sat down at the kitchen table and took a deep breath. This was real, really real. In a few days, I would be rich, financially secure. How would that change my life? My thoughts went back to Ezra and our dinner. Should I tell him about the inheritance? Not long ago, I wouldn't have hesitated. His words still hurt. "You've always been a burden. It's time for you to finally learn to live on your own." "I'm ashamed of you." No, I decided. I wouldn't tell him. At least not yet. First, I'll get my life together. I'll do what he asked of me. Get back on my feet, make a plan, take care of my future. And only then, maybe, will I let him know. Not to apologize or to get his approval, but simply to show him that I can live without him, without his criticism and judgment. The next few days passed in a fantastic whirlwind. The courier delivered the documents, as Mr. Stubbs had promised. I signed them and sent them back the same day. A feeling of calm and determination swept over me. There was nothing to be sad about at work. My last days at the factory were filled with paperwork for dismissal, saying goodbye to my colleagues, cleaning out my locker. Most of the employees were gloomy, some were openly crying, but I felt excited, as if fate had opened a door I had never noticed. "You look different," Doris said at lunch on the last day. "Almost happy. Do you have a new job yet?" I smiled, not wanting to share my secret. "No, but I have some opportunities." "Well, you were always the optimist," Doris sighed. "I just hope I can find something with health insurance. With Bob's arthritis." I listened to her concerns, nodding in appropriate places, but part of me was already absent. I was thinking about new opportunities, new horizons. For the first time in years, I felt free. 6 days after sending the documents, I received a notification of an extremely large deposit to my bank account. The amount was so absurdly large that I checked the zeros several times, not believing my own eyes. $2,983,200, after all taxes and fees. I sat on the couch with my phone in my hands, trying to comprehend this amount. It was more money than I had ever earned in my entire life, more than I had ever dreamed of having. My first impulse was to call Ezra, to share the news, to see his reaction. But the memory of the dinner and his words stopped me. No, it was my money, my new life, and I wanted to start it without the shadow of a toxic relationship. Instead, I did something completely out of character for me. I opened a bottle of wine that had been in the cabinet since last Christmas, poured myself a glass, and raised a toast to myself. "To a new life, Marta," I said out loud. "To new beginnings." The next day, I took action. First, I made an appointment with a financial advisor Mr. Stubbs had recommended. James Forrester had an office in downtown Tulsa, and when I walked in, dressed in my best suit, which still looked a little cheap for the place, he greeted me with a professional respect I had rarely felt in my life. "Ms. Ellington, nice to meet you." He shook my hand. "Mr. Stubbs spoke highly of you." "Really?" I couldn't imagine what a lawyer I'd only spoken to a few times on the phone could say about me. "He said you seem like a sensible woman who needs wise counsel on how to manage unexpected wealth." Forrester smiled. "And he said you don't tend to make impulsive decisions, which is rare among new clients with large sums of money." I felt warmed by this characterization. "I do want to be careful. This money, it's a chance at a new life, and I don't want to blow it." Forrester nodded. "A wise approach. So let's talk about your goals. What do you want to do with this money?" We spent the next 2 hours discussing possibilities. I told him about my dismissal from the factory, my modest savings, and my desire to secure a stable future, but also about my dream of living a fuller life, perhaps traveling, studying what interests me, having a comfortable home. "Based on your goals," Forrester summarized after our conversation, "I suggest the following strategy. Invest part of the funds in long-term, stable assets that will provide you with income. Part of it can be used to buy a home, which is always a good investment. And part of it should be available for your current needs and for those activities you want to try." He laid out several investment options in front of me, explaining the risks and potential profits of each. I listened carefully, asked questions, and tried to understand this new world of finance. By the end of the meeting, I had a preliminary plan, not perfect, but a start. "Think about these suggestions," said Forrester, handing me a folder of documents. "There's no need to rush. I'll see you next week after you've thought about it." I left his office with a sense of confidence and control that I hadn't had in a very long time. The next step was to find a place to live. My rented apartment had always been just a place for me to sleep. Small, functional, without much character. Now I could afford something better. I spent several days looking at real estate ads online, visiting different neighborhoods in Tulsa, trying to figure out where I wanted to live. I avoided the Oak Grove neighborhood where Ezra lived. I didn't want to run into him or his wife by accident. Eventually, a small apartment complex called Riverside caught my attention. Modern but not too pretentious, located near a park, with a great view of the river. "This is one of our most popular complexes," the real estate agent said, showing me a two-bedroom apartment on the fourth floor, especially among people who are downsizing after their children have moved out, or professionals who value peace in a convenient location. The apartment was spacious, with large windows, a small balcony, and a modern kitchen. When I stepped out onto the balcony and saw the green park below and the sparkling river in the distance, something clicked inside. This was it, a place that could become home. How much? I asked, preparing myself for the answer that a week ago would have made me smile bitterly. When the agent named the price, I didn't flinch. I'll take it. The buying process turned out to be more complicated than I expected, with a lot of paperwork, inspections, and expectations. But 3 weeks later, I held the keys to my own apartment, the first home I had ever owned in my entire life. During this time, I also met with Forrester twice more, finalizing the details of my investment. I decided to allocate the funds among several categories: conservative investments to ensure a steady income, moderate investments for long-term growth, and a small portion of riskier investments with high return potential. Diversification is the key to success, Forrester explained, and I diligently studied his recommendations by reading the personal finance books he recommended. Moving to a new apartment was another step in my transformation. I realized that I wanted to start from scratch, so I left most of my old furniture: a worn-out sofa, a table with hot cup marks, a bed that creaked every time I turned. Instead, I chose new things that reflected me, not luxurious, but high quality, with character. A deep blue armchair by the window for reading, a comfortable desk for studying, real plants instead of the artificial ones that were in the old apartment. I felt strange spending money on things that were not absolutely necessary. But then I reminded myself that this is my life now, my apartment, my choices. I didn't contact Ezra all this time, and he didn't try to contact me either. But I knew that the news of my changes would reach him sooner or later. Tulsa is not such a big city, and we had mutual friends. And indeed, one evening, about 2 months after our last meeting, I heard the doorbell of my new apartment ring. Looking through the peephole, I saw my son's face, tense and serious. For a moment, I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore the call, to pretend I wasn't home. But I knew that would only delay the inevitable conversation. "Ezra," I said as I opened the door, trying to keep my voice neutral. What a surprise. He stood there dressed in his work suit, obviously just after work. His gaze followed me, assessing my new apartment with undisguised surprise. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice sounding tense. I stepped back, allowing him to pass. Ezra walked in slowly, looking around, taking in the new furniture, the art on the walls, the general atmosphere of comfort and taste. "Nice place," he said at last. "Very unusual for you." "Thank you," I replied dryly. "Tea? Coffee?" "No, thank you." He still stood there as if he didn't dare to sit down uninvited. "Please sit down," I pointed to the couch. Ezra sat down on the edge of the couch, his body as tense as a string. "I heard from Sylvia Johnson that you had moved. She saw you looking around the place." Sylvia was the wife of Ezra's co-worker and lived not far from my new complex. I sighed inwardly. Of course, the world is too small. "Yes, I moved in a few weeks ago," I confirmed, sitting down across from him in my new blue chair. "And, did you buy this place? Or are you renting?" His question was cautious, but I could hear the real question behind it. "Where did you get the money?" "I bought it." He nodded, waiting for a continuation that didn't come. "Mom," he finally said, his voice softer, almost pleading. "What's going on? How can you afford this place? Did you find a new job?" I looked at him for a moment, deciding how much to say. "No, I'm not working right now." Then, he stopped talking, clearly confused. "This place must have cost a lot." 420,000, I confirmed calmly. His eyes widened. 400? Mom, what's going on? Did you take out some giant loan? That's irresponsible. At your age, without a job. "I didn't take out a loan, Ezra," I interrupted him. "I paid the full amount." He looked at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. "That's impossible. Where did you get that kind of money?" I took a deep breath. "I inherited it." "An inheritance? From whom?" All our relatives were poor as church mice. From Uncle Alfred, your grandfather's brother. The weirdo who went to Europe? He died years ago. No, he died 2 months ago. In Budapest. And he left me all his stuff. Ezra looked like he didn't know whether to believe me or not. And how much did he leave you? I looked him straight in the eye. $3 million. He literally gasped. 3 million? His voice broke on the last word. 2,983,200 after taxes and fees to be exact, I said calmly, enjoying his shock in spite of myself. And when did you find out about this? The day I was fired from the factory. He froze. Before you came to dinner? Yes. Silence hung between us. I could see the emotions changing in his eyes: shock, disbelief, understanding, and then panic. Why didn't you tell us? He finally asked. I wanted to tell you about losing my job first, to see your reaction. I wanted to save the news about the money for later. I looked him straight in the eye. And your reaction told me everything I needed to know. He looked away, clearly remembering that evening, his cruel words, his dismissive attitude. Mom, that night, I didn't mean it. What did you mean, Ezra? That I'm a burden? That you were ashamed of me? That I should have finally learned to live on my own? He ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly tired and much older. I was annoyed, worried. Paisley and I are planning a baby, and I thought, if you were out of work, that I'd come with my hand out? I finished for him. Isn't that what you said? That I always come for money, even if it's not right away. He did not answer, and his silence was more eloquent than any words. Ezra, in all these years, how many times have I asked you for financial help? Twice? 3 times? And I've always paid back every cent. I know, but it's not about the past. I was thinking about the future, your pension, your health insurance. My pension? Really? I couldn't help but laugh. Or maybe you just didn't want your rich friends to know that your mother was just a factory worker who lost her job at 53. His face flashed, revealing that I had hit the nail on the head. You know, I would say that night was one of the worst of my life, I continued in a quieter voice. But it was actually a gift. He showed me the truth, about you, about us, a truth I didn't want to see for years. Mom, I was rude, yes. I regret what I said. But I was right about one thing. You needed to start living for yourself. He made a wide gesture, pointing to the apartment. And look, you've done it. You're living a fuller life. Isn't that what I was trying to say? Don't twist your words, I said firmly. You weren't trying to help me. You wanted me to disappear from your life, to stop being an inconvenience, a burden. That's not true, he argued, but his eyes avoided mine. Ezra, I'm not stupid. I may not have a college degree, as you keep reminding me, but I know when I'm being rejected. He sighed, as if in surrender. Okay, I've been cruel. I've been unfair. But you have to understand that Paisley and I have our own problems. The mortgage, the baby plans, her parents constantly comparing us to her sister and her surgeon husband. So I was a convenient scapegoat? I asked. An easy target for your irritation? No. Yes. Maybe. He lowered his head. I'm sorry. We sat in silence for a while. I looked at my son, the man I had raised, the man I loved more than anyone in the world, and felt a strange mixture of love and sadness. He was my child, but he was also a stranger. And maybe he always had been. You know, he said suddenly, his voice more cheerful. Maybe it's for the best. Now you can enjoy your life, and we can spend more time together without worrying about money. I looked at him, amazed at his ability to move from disappointment to enthusiasm so quickly, from rejecting me to wanting to be a part of my new, financially secure life. Actually, I was thinking, he leaned forward, his eyes suddenly lighting up. I have an idea for an investment. My client mentioned a new restaurant business that is looking for investors. Nothing big, maybe 3 or 400,000 to start with. But the potential is huge, and we could be partners. I stared at him, not believing my ears. You came here, found out that I got an inheritance, and your first thought was how to get some of the money for yourself? No, not for me. He looked genuinely offended. For both of us. It could be something we do together. Something we could do together. And 2 months ago, you told me that I was always a burden, and you were ashamed of me in front of your friends. I already said that I regret those words. I was upset, worried. And now you're not upset? Not worried? Because I have money? Mom, his voice was lower, almost pleading. I kicked you out for your own good. There it was. Exactly the words I expected to hear. His attempt to rewrite history, to turn his cruelty into an act of care. For my own good, I repeated, feeling something inside me finally let go. How was it for my own good, Ezra? You've lived in the past for too long. For too long, you've defined yourself through the role of a single mother who sacrifices everything. You needed a push to start living for yourself. His eyes were serious, as if he really believed what he was saying. And that push had to be in the form of public humiliation? Kicking me out of your house when I needed your support the most? I didn't plan for it to happen that way. But you have to admit, it worked. Look at you now. Your own apartment, financial independence. Thanks to Uncle Alfred, not your cruelty. I shook my head. Ezra, do you really not understand, or are you just pretending? What am I supposed to understand? He looked genuinely confused. That relationships don't work like that. That you can't treat people like garbage and then expect them to forget it when the situation changes. He opened his mouth to object, but I held up my hand to stop him. No, let me finish. For years I thought I knew you. I thought I had raised a kind, caring man. But that night I saw the other side. Cold, calculating, selfish. And today I see it again. That's not fair, he protested. I came to apologize. You came when you found out about my money, I corrected. 2 months before that, you didn't call, write, or come to check on me. Whether I had found a new job, whether I had a roof over my head, whether I had food to eat. He fell silent, unable to answer. And you know what's the saddest thing, Ezra? If you had done that, just called, asked how I was without mentioning money or help, I would probably have told you about the inheritance myself. I would have shared my happiness, maybe even offered to help with those plans for the baby. His eyes widened at the thought, and I saw a moment of real understanding, perhaps even remorse. But it quickly disappeared, replaced by something more calculating. We can still fix this, he said, leaning forward. We're family. The past is in the past. I looked at him, my son, my blood, and finally saw him for what he was. Not a monster, not a movie villain, just a man who always looked at the world through the prism of his own interests. Perhaps I had partially created him that way myself, trying too hard to protect him from the difficulties of life. Ezra, I said gently but firmly, I want you to leave. He looked shocked. What? I want you to leave. I'm not ready to have this conversation right now. I need time. But we've just started talking. I have so many ideas of how we could. Please go, I repeated, standing up. When I'm ready to talk, I'll contact you. He looked at me with disbelief, then with anger, and finally with calculation. Is this about money? Do you think I'm here just for it? Isn't it? I asked simply. He did not answer. Instead, he slowly rose, his face impenetrable. Think about that investment, he said, heading for the door. It's a good opportunity, for both of us. I didn't answer, just opened the door. Ezra paused on the threshold as if waiting for the last word, but I didn't say anything. Finally, he sighed and walked out. I closed the door and leaned back against it, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. I finally saw my son for who he really was. And while this truth was painful, it was also liberating. As I looked at my new apartment, at the life I had begun to build for myself, I felt a strange gratitude for Uncle Alfred, whom I barely knew. His unexpected gift had given me not only financial freedom, but also something much more valuable: clarity of vision, 3 million reasons to start a new life, and one, the most important, to finally see the truth.